Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome one more time to Encounter. Glad that you're here with us this morning. As Dylan mentioned, we're heading into fall launch. This is an exciting time for us. We want to recognize, though, that as we enter into the kickoff of the ministry year, it's so true, isn't it? It's so true that before God does anything powerful through us, He will always do a powerful work in us. And so that's what this 40 days of prayer campaign that we kicked off on Wednesday, it is not too late to get involved in that. encounterchurch.org/40 days of prayer. We want to recognize our daily dependence on Jesus in every possible way because He has an incredibly powerful work for us, and He's been showing us a lot. We kicked this off on Wednesday evening with a night of prayer, and that was great. And so we really, as a whole church community, want to surround this time and this season to recognize what God is going to do in and through us. Today we're in a series. We're actually wrapping up the series called Respectable Sins. It's part 3 of 3. We're in a series where we take a look at some of the things that in our heart of hearts we probably know are wrong, but we kind of dress them up a little, right? We put a little bow tie on them, wear a suit, and we kind of do some things or maybe think some things that in our heart of hearts probably know that it's outside of the line that God would have for us, but we've justified it. We've found it maybe acceptable, maybe necessary to spare somebody's feelings from being hurt. We talked about some of the ways that we step out of line with our words a couple weeks ago. Last week we talked about anger. And we said there were a couple of different kinds of angry people. There's stewers that kind of keep it all in, and there's spewers who let it all out. And it's just an invitation to consider what kind of angry person might you be, and what might God do with that anger in a healthy and constructive way. Today we continue on respectable sins, and we look at some of those things that aren't just out there somewhere, right? Like murder or war crimes, stuff that you can kind of go to jail for. And say, no. There's also some things inside of us, things happening inside of our hearts that we're not going to go to jail for. This isn't a crime at all. And we might even justify it by saying it's a victimless crime, if a crime at that. Today we're going to look at some of the words of Jesus as He talked about how we look at each other. Specifically, how we look at each other. The title of today's message is Love and Lust and Marriage and Intimacy and everything in between. And before we jump into the content of this series, I want to share, listen, maybe you're married for a long, long time. Maybe you just got married. Maybe you're not, or you'd like to be, or you're not looking at all. I think this applies to every single person in this room because Jesus Himself talked about this in His world-famous Sermon on the Mount speech. It's probably one of the most famous speeches in all of human history. That includes the speech from Independence Day with the President Whitmore, giving his address. Like Jesus' speech even comes on top of that one, the Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, he looked at His people a lot like I'm looking at you now. And some of the words of Jesus that He shared was, listen, if you look at He said woman, but we're going to say person. If you even look at a person and there's lust inside of your heart, He's like, what's happening internally, it might as well happen externally. If you look at somebody like that, you've already had adultery with them in your heart. And so that's where the love and the lust part comes in. And some of these respectable sins, because we look at that today, and come on, we're like, Jesus, that was a bit of an exaggeration, right? I mean, that's a bit much, that's a bit over the top. We're a little bit more sophisticated than that these days. Is it? What we want to do today is take a look at that, especially that line, along with Jesus' other line that He gave in the very same speech, where He said, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Throw it away. I mean, it's better, Jesus said, it's better for you to go into this whole and complete life with one hand and one eye and experience hell in this world with both eyes and with both hands. Now, come on, Jesus, that's hyperbole. That's way over the top. It's an exaggeration, but I get your point. Is it? We're going to take a look at that today because I think that's, as a culture, as a society, and even as followers of Jesus, in a lot of ways, that's kind of where we've ended up. As saying, I think it's probably, it's over the top. I mean, after all, what are we talking about, really? We're talking about, stealing a look, Maybe just, a lingering glare. It's totally victimless. I mean, we just sort of, accept that it's a thing. happening all around us. Maybe the person that sits next to us in class, going to the store, you just see somebody walking down the street, and it's a glance that just kind of hangs out, just a little bit longer. It's in the gym. I mean, there's mirrors everywhere in the gym. You can't help. You're trying to bounce your eyes. You're like, where do I go? I can just see everybody around me all the time. This whole system, this whole world is set up in order to view each other that way. Or maybe we justify it by saying hey, it's respectable after all. They posted it. And if I'm looking at it, even for a while, if I'm gazing, after all, it's their choice to post. They want to be seen, so I'm just obliging. Come on, Jesus. It's a little old-fashioned, right? I think we've grown and we've evolved past that. Some of the lines that I've heard in talking about this with some other people is, listen, Dirk, it's a pastime. It's a recreation. It's just something that I do to keep myself from becoming bored. It's no problem. It's no harm, no foul. It's like window shopping. You walk by something, you see it in the window. You're not going to go in. You're not buying. You're just looking. One person even told me, what's the big deal? Why does it matter where I go get my appetite as long as I'm coming home for dinner? And I'm like, wait, you know I'm a pastor, right? We're going to take a look. We're going to take a look at this important matter, really because I think somewhere along the line, somebody probably told us, you should maybe knock it off. Maybe it was a helpful youth leader who said, that's not your best. That's not your best look. That's not what God has for you. Maybe a friend said, hey, dude, the way that you're looking, honestly, it's kind of creepy. You should knock that off, right? And then that's okay. But I think it's maybe something more than that, because I think there's a chance that we didn't tell you the why behind it all. And that's what I'd like to spend a little time on this morning, is for you to walk into yourself, or you to walk into your relationship, if you're in one, or really any relationship ever, in case you're not in one already, is for you to go into that relationship with the highest and best life and marriage and intimacy that Jesus possibly has for you, that God has for you, the why behind it all. And I recognize that as I say that, there's probably a couple different groups of people in the room, right? There's a group of people in the room, and I recognize it, that you're not quite there with Jesus yet. He's not like God, Jesus, right? You didn't cut him a blank check of your life. A check is an ancient form of payment. You can ask your parents about that later, right? There's this recognition. There's some people who aren't quite I'm interested in Jesus. I'm not sold out to him yet. And I just want to say, you're off the hook on this message. I see no reason why you have to abide by some of the stuff that we're going to talk about right now. Although I do believe that the closer we walk in the footsteps of Jesus, even if we're not totally putting our hearts in him, I think that you kind of get some of the residual blessing of God after we live our lives patterned after how he taught us to live our lives. So there could be some content today that I think is going to be helpful for you, even if you're not Jesus is Lord and I'm totally in all the way. Now, for the other group of people, for those of you who are I am trying with every fiber of my being the best as I possibly can to live out the calling of God in my life, man, this is what we're talking about today is mandatory. This is core value, pay to play kind of importance. This is baseline. In fact, we're going to go to a passage in just a moment and take a look at early Christianity and see that how we got this thing right was a hallmark of the early church. How we looked at each other in the church was something that the church was known for, and word spread around because of it. We're talking about how we look at each other and that kind of lustful maybe look in our eye, or the gazing look, and kind of how we get this wrong sometimes, and it's not our best look. And I'm not saying it hasn't been done, because I think it has been done in the past. So I'm not even introducing anything new to us entirely. I'm just trying to do this callback and say, listen, as a church body, there was a point in time where we, as followers of Jesus, got this thing right. And if we're attentive to God's leading, I think that it's possible. We can get this thing right again. In our lives, in our marriages, in our relationships are going to be wildly blessed as a result. So we're going to go together in some of those words to the early church in 1 Peter chapter 3. And we're going to hang out. It's one verse long, and there's a lot of content on this verse. 1 Peter 3, we're phone friendly. You can pull it up, take some notes that way. And the verse is also going to be on the screen behind me. this defining characteristic, Peter writes this open letter to Jesus' followers all over Asia Minor, that's kind of modern-day Turkey, but really an open letter to anybody following Jesus. And he's giving these instructions on how men and women should relate to one another. And he goes, okay, husbands, men, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. He uses this little word, respect. A little bit more on that in just a moment. But when he says, treat them with respect, we can pause right there and be like, did he need to say that? I mean, isn't that kind of assumed already? Treat one another with respect, groundbreaking information. Let's just grant it to Peter that he wasn't just spilling a little ink, you know? He didn't just have too much ink that he needed to get some out onto the page. He chose these words specifically because I think they needed to be said. I mean, let's open it up a little bit and unpack what Peter's life was like, what the life of a typical person in the Roman Empire was like. As they viewed one another, they didn't view one another with respect. That's why he needed to say a thing like that. Because especially women in that culture, it's shocking that he even writes to them, how countercultural that is. Women in the Roman Empire weren't viewed as people with, personhood. Women in the Roman Empire weren't viewed with any kind of status or rights unto themselves at all. And we can kind of come down on Roman culture, and we're going to make a comment on that in just a minute. But before we do, we start to recognize that this is pervasive. This is all over. In fact, it even kind of slips its way into the Bible at times with some of the language and some of the way they did their lives. I'll give you an example. Jesus one time, after he got done teaching, it started to become dinner time, and people are getting hungry, and so he takes a couple of fish sticks and a dinner roll. It multiplies, and passes it out. How many people did he feed? 5,000 people. It's right there in the Bible. And it's not 5,000 people, though. The culture of the day is that it's 5,000 men. They counted men. It's 5,000 men, and they didn't count women because women didn't count. So for Peter to sit down and say, listen, men and women, how you guys should relate to one another, and use this word, respect. It's he's introducing an entire new system, an entire new value system, a worldview into their vocabulary. What? I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Respect. Nobody does that. Peter, you're asking us to do what just simply hasn't been done before? In the Roman Empire, get this, it got so bad, and it got to the point, things got so low in their view of women because of a number of different factors. So Roman law and custom dictated that the definition of adultery was relations with a person who was either married or maybe they were yet to be married daughter of another person. Right? So if you made this career, right, out of relations with some other people, if you were a prostitute, that was legal and that was permissible. In fact, in the Roman world, that was even encouraged as a way of exercising people's appetites. If you're hungry, get something to eat. If you're thirsty, you get something to drink. If your urges are another line, you can visit this person. And it doesn't even count as adultery because of the definition of it. People started having kids, right? Girls. Girls would grow up, and in order to marry them off, the parents would have to put together a large sum of money in proportion to their level of income to gift it to the husband-to-be to help them kind of establish their own system. People started realizing, I don't think there's any advantage whatsoever to having girls. I mean, there's no heir to give my things. There's not a family line that's going to continue as a result. Why am I doing this? And so they started doing horrible things. They started giving these little baby girls up, exposing them sending them off into the woods or in a river somewhere, just trying to get rid of them, whatever they have to do, because the value was so small. They didn't really care. And so historically, twice, it came up in the Roman Senate. A bill was introduced in the Roman Senate to make marriage among young men mandatory, because they realized nobody wants to get married anymore. There's no upside, especially if you can just fulfill your needs by finding a person whose occupation that is. They didn't count women. Women didn't count. And then Peter writes this letter, this open letter to the church, and he goes, but not so with you. You guys are going to be different. And so this little gathering started, right? And people kind of liked it. It was refreshing in a new way that they've never seen before. This gathering started taking hold and started to spread. 1 group, 2 groups, 4 groups, 8 groups, 16 groups, 32, 64, more math. It kept on growing. These little assemblies, these little ecclesias, they called them, these little churches. Gathering in people's homes, gathering in people's businesses, open air. In spaces like this one, whenever they could get together, they started gathering. And in those gatherings, life was different because they'd open up the words of Jesus and they would read about what Jesus has to say about how we look and lust after one another. They opened up these words of like Peter and started reading these instructions for people who are trying to follow out Jesus and saying, like, listen, your life is going to be dictated, and the word that he uses is respect. Respect. And Jesus said, your rule is going to be that you love one another. In fact, he elevates it so much as to say, you know what, the whole world is going to know who I am and why I came because of how you treat one another. Because of this little word, respect, that you're going to give every single person. And there's a hand in the back that goes up. Even the women? Yes, even the women, like all of the people. Because of how you treat one another, everybody is going to know, Jesus says, who I am and what I came to do. I can kind of imagine people in settings like that going, I think my wife is going to like this. I think people are going to, and they did, and it spread. And it was this attractive, refreshing, fresh air kind of mentality, kind of energy that was sweeping through the Roman Empire. Jesus knew a change like that doesn't quite just happen like overnight, you know? Like you don't just make up your mind to renew your mind and then like it's done. You know, a switch that flips. Jesus is like, a change like this that's been going on as long as this is going to take practice. And I love this about following Jesus. Whenever he's asking us to practice anything, he's always the one who goes first. So Jesus is like, okay, we're talking about respecting one another, women and men. We're talking about assigning them honor. But Jesus goes, I'll go first. And in John chapter 4, like right off the bat, in the story of John was one of Jesus' closest friends and followers. And John kept some notes, or at least remembered what had happened right away in his Jesus story in John 4. He goes, Jesus did the wildest thing. He hung out at a well, like where you get water from, where women came, and he waited for a Samaritan woman to come to the well. And then he had the audacity to ask her for a drink. Like, Jesus, you're going to drink a cup from a girl? And Jesus is like, yeah, because it's honoring to her. It's showing this sign of respect. And John thought that's where it ended. And then he found out a little bit later, oh, no, that's just where it started. Because there's this another time, a little bit later, where this woman that was caught in adultery. Now, pause. What did we learn already about the definition of adultery in the Roman times? Sometimes if you've heard this story before, you're like, doesn't that like take two to tango, you know? Like, we know where she is. Where's the dude in all of this, right? Like what happened to that guy? And we kind of skip over that part. Well, according to Roman law, I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. Remember, like he got hungry, he found something to eat, he was thirsty, he'd find something to drink. If your urge is of another kind, then you just find a woman. Because she's treated like a commodity, like an object, like a thing that can be bought or traded or sold. And he was just doing that. But now, if he was married, still, no problem on his part. He was just fulfilling an urge, but her, I mean, that's adultery. After all, he was a married man. You know, and so they dragged this woman out in front of Jesus and like put her there. And John goes, I thought the cup, you know, at the well with the Samaritan woman was a big deal. Jesus sticks his neck out on the line for her. Practice. Respect. Respect. I want to give this definition of respect because Because Peter uses a particular word that's only been used once in the New Testament. Respect means to grant or assign someone honor. And I think it's interesting that this word is used only one time in the Greek New Testament because Peter's a fisherman, right? I mean, he dropped out of school when he was 10, 11, 12. I mean, he's got like up to a 5th grade education. He's not a writer, right? He's not great with words. That's not his job. He left to find fish with his dad's business. That's his thing. But he like mines his vocabulary, right? He searches for just exactly the right word, the only time it's used. And I think it's so powerful, and it draws our attention to that one a little bit more. He's trying to make a point that we grant or assign someone honor. Because there's this understanding like, what if the person maybe that you're married to, or what if the person maybe that you're looking at on the internet, what if the person isn't exactly deserving of honor, right? Like, what if the person isn't exactly honorable? And Peter's like, it doesn't matter. Because respect isn't dictated on whether or not they're honorable, whether or not they earned that. Respect is dictated based on us assigning honor, assigning respect to that person. It doesn't matter how honorable they are. It's on us to assign that respect and that honor. Now we're going to continue on because we're in like the half of the first verse, and we're going to try to get through an entire verse together here today. So he says, okay, so you're treating one another, you're treating men, you're treating women with respect, and it continues on as the weaker partner. Now before I get any email, before I get like anybody's offended on this, he just means, as a casual observation, he is probably going to beat her in an arm wrestling competition. Like, that's it, right? Like, most of the time, some of the time, that's going to happen. Now, he's not making a statement on men being like more capable. He's not making a statement on men being smarter or anything else like that. He's just making this observation, but it's also a really, really important observation to make because in that context of the day, might made right. To an extent today, you could also make that observation, might makes right. And Jesus, again, not so with you. Jesus is saying strength, honor, resources, influence, money, the things that you have available to you ought to be leveraged on behalf of those that don't have those things available to them. So he's just making a comment and saying, listen, in this culture, especially the men, I mean, you guys have a lot going for you. And your job isn't to exercise that to take. No, just the opposite. In these little ecclesias that are spreading like wildfire all around, in these little ecclesias, it's totally different. You use your resources, use your money, status, power, and influence on behalf of those who don't have it at all. So treat them with respect as the weaker ones, leverage for their gain, not yours, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. Because when you look at another person, at the store, at the gym, driving down the road, on TikTok, on Instagram, on anywhere else, when you look at another person as heirs, they're serving and they are answerable to the very same higher power that you are. When you look at another person, no matter who they are, what they've done, the background, any of it, when you look at another person, you are looking at somebody for whom Jesus left heaven. When you look at another person, you don't look at them as just somebody wearing the image of God, as if it was like a coat. You look at another person, according to Genesis 1, as the very image of God that he made. You're looking at somebody for whom Jesus loved to death and back again to new life. Of course, we're going to assign them honor. Of course, we're going to show them respect. Of course, we're going to leverage whatever we have at our disposal for the benefit of them. Of course, we're going to look at them with the infinite value, dignity, and worth that God himself has assigned to her or to him. I mean, if you're a follower of Jesus, there's really no other choice. There's a question, though, of how we do that. Where do we go from there? I think a couple of things. On the more surface level, there's like this recognition of to honoring somebody, to assign them dignity and respect, to assign them as honor. We do this kind of naturally with some, and it comes a little less naturally to others. You can think of a person in your life. If you're a man, then probably a woman, probably a man. But if you can think of somebody in your life of the opposite sex that you really strongly admire. Maybe it's a scientist, maybe it's somebody who made some huge discoveries, maybe it's a civil rights leader, maybe it's an artist, a musician, a movie star. I don't know, somebody that you're just like, holy cow, I just have a tremendous amount of respect for that person. And then imagine, like, they walked into the room during the song set, and you're like, whoa, I can't believe it's like so-and-so. And there's immediate, like, this sense of honor, even before the conversation takes place. And you're like scooching over and going, no, you can have my seat. Like, it's fine. I'll find somewhere. I'll stand in the back. Like, I'll go to the upper lobby. Dirk wants us to do that anyway when it's full. So it's good, right? Like, there's this sense of, like, I can automatically assign them honor. And what Peter is saying, like, in every relationship that you have or in any interaction with a human being, whether it's face-to-face or screen-to-screen, show them that, assign them that very same honor. Because that person is not a commodity. It's not an object to be used, to be bought, to be sold. That person doesn't belong to anybody. You don't have the right to ghost them and to not come back, right? Like all these sort of stuff. No. There's honor. It's automatically assigned. With some people, you get it instinctively. With others, it takes practice. And we know how to do that. We know how to show honor. Sometimes. And I think sometimes we can get better at it with a little practice too. But if I could, there's like a whole deeper layer onto this one. And so I want to take a minute and I want to talk to a group of people where this isn't like a passing glance. This isn't something that's just a lingering look. I want to talk to somebody who's stuck in it. The biblical word is the sin that ensnares. I want to talk to the one that, like, I can't help but just be drawn to some of the dark corridors on the internet. And I visit regularly. I want to talk to the person who particularly said, you know what, at first it was like this level of shame that kind of came out, and I just wish that I could be freed from this. I wish that I could be done with this. And then maybe I talked to some other people, and I just read a little bit more about it. And honestly, the things that I was reading about it, some people were saying it's really not even so bad. That I shouldn't even feel bad. After all, when I get hungry, I get something to eat. Thirsty, I get something to drink. Maybe this is an urge, just like every other urge, and I can just scratch it. And I want to present to you that every time you participate, every time you visit the site, male, female, doesn't matter, universally applicable. Every time we do this, we enroll in a particular kind of school with a curriculum really around three things. And I've asked for them on the screen, and just linger on the screen for a little while. What we're learning when we visit the sites is that a real body isn't good enough. Because come on. We know that the internet isn't real. We know that it's pixels on a screen. We also learn that one body isn't good enough. As we flip from person to person, from website to website. We also learn that your body, whoever you are, isn't good enough. You could also fill in your wife's body, your future husband's body. What we're learning, these three things, a real body, one body, your body, isn't good enough. When I have the opportunity to unpack some of this and just to ask, that Psalm 139 thing that we've been doing, just pray the prayer. Search me, God. Is there an offensive way inside of me? Highlight that for me. And when I point this out to people, the general response that I get, it's not denial. It's not argumentative. For the most part, it's, yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Yeah, that kind of aligns with my experience. like over the long haul. And I visit enough times, I participate enough times, and I start to pick up, I start to internalize what the school that I'm enrolled in has taught me. And the consequences aren't something that I would wish for those around me. There's an element here that I would just love to be away from. And some people have maybe said that it's okay. But over the long haul, attitudes and mindsets change. It's somewhat unrelated, but I'll tie it in. Fun fact, not fun, I don't know why I said that. World War II, okay. In World War II, the United States government actually gifted soldiers, GIs, cigarettes. Because for them, it was an opportunity to keep the troops occupied. It was like a pastime. It was a recreation. And they're like, hey, listen, if we could just keep people occupied for a little while, like take up this new endeavor, take up this new hobby. It's called smoking. Like, it's fine. It's an innocent pastime to keep from being bored. I don't know exactly how long it was, 15, 20, 50 years, who knows? But eventually we started to realize, I don't think that's as healthy as maybe you think it is. And we can kind of look back at Uncle Sam and going, that was probably not our finest moment in U.S. history. There were some devastating consequences of those actions that we thought were fine at the time. There was an uh-oh. There was a getcha attached to it. And what we're finding, and I say we, I mean just anybody who reads the literature, what we're finding is remarkably similar. No matter how much people have said, it's fine. Go to the websites, fulfill your urges, do whatever you got to do. It's a pastime, it's a recreation, it's a way of keep from being bored. There's an uh-oh. There's a getcha. And God didn't want it to get you. But here we are. What we're finding, it's not a pastime. It's a pathway, and it's leading to somewhere. It's leading to destruction. It's not just a pastime. It's a pathway, a curriculum that we learn and lead us to destruction. Come back to the words of Jesus. Come on, man. Gouge out your eye? Cut off your hand? It's a wild exaggeration, hyperbole. I can tell you from hanging out with people that internalized the curriculum. The pastime was a pathway, and they found out firsthand. Everything blew up. And we're sitting in my office, and I haven't asked, but I think I know the answer. If you could give your eye to have your family back, I don't think it's that big of an exaggeration. I'd give my hand in a second. It's not a pastime. It's a pathway to destruction. So make a commitment. Make up your mind to renew your mind. You're not alone. Help. It's right on the other side. I want to help. We want to help as a community. Maybe it's a software thing, Covenant Eyes, Lion, Ever Accountable. There's a million of them. And they all cost about $10. If the finances are a barrier, I didn't talk to anybody at the church about this, but we'll pay for it. We got it. Let's start the conversation. Email me at dirk@encounterchurch.org. I want you to step into the fullest, the best, the highest life that Jesus has available to you. And if I could put a PS on all of this thing, right? This whole long rambling email of a conversation. if I could just talk to single men for just a moment, like as a guy talking to single guys, everybody else, you can listen in or not, it doesn't matter, it won't be long. But I just want to land the plane on this. Like, just think about this. From my conversations extensively, there are a huge number, there's a huge amount of women, huge number of women, countless women, who have almost entirely given up on finding a guy who lives this out. Like, I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my goodness, I am so entirely dissatisfied. Like, this is a huge quantity of people. And men, young men, looking to not be single men. If you could just like get this thing right, you know? If you could show this honor, assign this honor, if you could show this respect, if you could view women, all women, with this infinite dignity and worth that the image of God requires in them, right? If you could be the kind of person that the person you're looking for is looking for, I am telling you, men, that puts you in a very exclusive group, a very small group of men who are also very, very desirable to a huge number of women. I'm telling you, it's like a dating superpower. Let's pray together. Stand up. Let's go to God together. Jesus, we come to you as people who have recognized that we've fallen down. God, we've gotten this thing wrong. Every single one of us. When we look at one another, whether it's face to face, whether we interact thumbs to thumbs, like whatever the thing is, God, however we're viewing people, IRL or pixels on a screen, we recognize that we haven't assigned honor, saw the infinite value, dignity, and worth somebody for whom you left heaven. So Jesus, when we fall down, may we be reminded that we're falling at the foot of the cross, your cross. And you love us. And you love us enough not to leave us fallen down. So Jesus, I pray for courage in these next few moments. God, I pray for action steps. I pray in time for power and for victory. I pray that each one of us gets to step into the highest and best life that you have in store for us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.